Thank you. Yeah, I'm gonna talk about my ninth novel. Can everyone hear me okay? Yeah. Okay, good. A New Season. And hope that this works. If you're wondering what this is, my novel in a nutshell slide. All right, settle down. All right, so I'm going to touch on the themes in this novel. We've got lots of themes happening in this story. Love, loss, and recovery. We'll come back to that. Aging. This is the first time I've ever written a novel where the narrator is my own age. All my other narrators previously had been much younger, which tells you how old I think I am inside. But so I was coming to grips with turning 65 just last December. So I'm still learning about that. You guys, many of you have gone through that already. I'm still wrestling with it. So I give those challenges to my narrator to see if I might learn something in the process. Male friendship. There aren't that very many novels that talk much about male friendship. There are lots of novels that talk about women's friendship. I sometimes think women do friendship better than we do. So I use a men's ball hockey league in Toronto as the vehicle through which I examine the idea of male friendship. So that's an interesting part of the story. So when you've got love, loss, and recovery, aging, male friendship, the third theme just kind of presents itself. I probably don't even have to tell you what it is. Songwriting. Yeah, I don't know why I tried to bring these disparate themes together in a novel, but these were just the ideas that were rattling around in my head. And the final theme, which flows so naturally from these previous four, is Paris in the 1920s. So there's a lot going on in this story, but I had a lot of fun writing. See over the microphone here. All right. So setting. As for settings, there are two settings in the novel. First of all, the community of Riverdale in Toronto. Those of you who know Toronto will know Riverdale is just east of the Don Valley Parkway, straddling Bloor Street, or the extension of Bloor on the other side, which is called the Danforth Avenue. So Riverdale, that's where the Ball Hockey League plays. And the Ball Hockey League is not fiction, even though the novel is fiction. It's a real league. I've played in it for the last 23 years. And that's where we play in that bottom picture that is not that easy to see. It's in a full hockey pad in Withrow Park. The second setting is Paris. And who doesn't like a novel set in Paris? How many of you have been to Paris? Okay. How many of you have been more than once? Okay, you feel about Paris the way I do then. What is behind this story? Well, in a funny kind of way, if you've heard me speak before, you may know that I'm a member in good standing of the Write What You Know School of Writing. You can find pieces of me and pieces of my life strewn about the pages of my novels, not in an autobiographical sense. I'm not writing about me. I just find it easier to write with authority and conviction and authenticity if I'm writing about worlds that I know or experiences that I've had or issues that I care about. And that's certainly the case in this novel. When I finished the manuscript for this story, I sent it to my editor and we went through the editing process. And then his job is to send the final manuscript to their marketing people, who then come up with a pithy little sentence that encapsulates the book, a daunting challenge. But in a way, Grant has already read that sentence. The sentence was, a novel unlike any of his others, which caught me a bit off guard because I thought the other novels were quite good. But it goes on to talk about love, loss, and recovery, and friendship, and family, and love. But if you've read any of my other novels, a description like this brings an elephant into the room. And the question is it funny? If I'm known for anything as a writer, and I may not be, but if I were to be known for something as a writer, it might be for writing novels that make you laugh and make you think sometimes at the same time. So if you've read all my other books, this one might not feel quite like the others because it was written in a different time. I'll come back to that thought. And the premise doesn't exactly lend itself to side-splitting laughter on every page. But I could not write a novel without my sense of humor eventually making it to the page, perhaps just not quite as often as in my other stories. So, uh-oh, something's just happened. Oh, still alive there. Okay. I don't know what happened, but oh, I'm still working. I just don't know what slide I'm on. But anyway, so here we are. What's behind the story? Well, in a strange way, John Irving is behind this story. Any John Irving fans in the audience? Prayer for Owen Meany, Hotel New Hampshire, World According to Garp. Okay, not okay. Good. Okay, he's probably my all-time favorite writer. And shortly, a couple of years ago, actually, 2 years ago there's a writers' festival in Uxbridge, Ontario called the Book Drunkard Festival. It's called the Book Drunkard because that's a quotation from Lucy Maud Montgomery. And Lucy Maud Montgomery, author of Anne of Green Gables and other stories, lived for quite some time in Uxbridge. So the bookstore owner there runs this festival and stole that quotation and called her festival the Book Drunkard Festival. And she called me one day, knowing how I felt about John Irving, and said, John Irving has agreed to speak at our festival. Would you like to introduce him? When I regained consciousness, I said yes, and I went ahead and I did that. We have, yep, there's a shot there. So we've lost the slides on my screen here, so I'm gonna have to turn my head now and then. So I went to the festival that night. I met John Irving, who now lives in Toronto, having spent most of his life in the US. And I got to know him a bit. I did the introduction. I tried to make it about John Irving and not about John Irving and me, but that was kind of difficult. And then if that weren't enough, afterwards, we spent 3 hours together having dinner at a restaurant in Uxbridge that was closed except for us. If that weren't enough, John emailed me a couple of months later. I call him John, well, not to his face, but in settings like this, I call him John. And he said, I'm doing a talk in Toronto at the Badminton and Racket Club. Would you interview me on stage for it? And I said, of course. So I had dinner with him again, and we had some great laughs. And he's a wonderful guy, and it was a thrill. What does that have to do with my novel? Well, John Irving has always said in various forms that he writes about that which he fears the most, and that which he hopes never happens to him or to anyone he loves. And I had that idea in my mind when I was coming time to write this novel, A New Season. That might be my agent calling. And you recall my usual approach to writing novels is to come up with an idea I care about and write a funny story that will make you laugh and think. But we were in the middle of the pandemic, and I was suffering what probably many of us in the room were suffering, a low level of depression, isolation, not being able to see our friends and family. And many of us, maybe some of you in the room had this experience too, lost people in the pandemic. And I just felt I couldn't simply write another straight up comic novel in the midst of this pandemic. I wanted those who had lost people to see themselves in a way in this timely story. So this novel is set in the pandemic. So I did what John Irving taught me to do. I took a page out of his playbook and I faced one of my own fears, and that would be to lose my spouse. I've always wanted to, I hope that I predecease my spouse so I don't have to go through the grieving process. But in this novel, I put myself through that. So I faced my fear, I followed the story where it took me, and I put the laughs in where they made sense. So it's not every page you're going to be chortling away, as you might, I hope, in some of my other novels. So, laughs where they fit. Right. In fact, there's a scene early on in the novel. I'm not telling you anything that doesn't happen in the first couple of pages. In fact, the novel is narrated by a 62-year-old freelance writer. He's 62 because when I wrote the novel, I was 62. Unfortunately, my narrator is still 62, but I'm now 65. And he's married to a high-flying mergers and acquisitions lawyer named Annie Barnes. His name is Jack McMaster. They live in Riverdale and they have a son named Will. And he earns about 20% of what his wife earns. So he works out of his house and he kind of takes care of their son as he's growing up. And she goes off to work every day in one of the glass towers at King and Bay. And as the pandemic started, you may recall there was that period where we were so familiar with the symptoms to be on the lookout for. And one day Annie Barnes goes to work, and this is 2.5 years before the novel opens. I'm giving you the backstory. And she ticked off in her mind all of the symptoms. She had all of the symptoms, wasn't feeling great. And she did what you might expect. She got in her car, she left work, but she didn't drive home. She drove straight to the hospital and was admitted. And as happened so often in those early stages of the pandemic, her husband and son were never again in the same room with her. And she passed away, not unexpectedly in those early stages of the pandemic. But before that, she knew what was happening to her. She knew the trajectory she was on. She knew the path she was on. She's very practical. And in a spasm of selflessness, she was not concerned about herself. She was concerned about her husband because she thought he needs to be with somebody. He's not great when he's on his own. She tried to talk to him about it, and he would hear none of it. He was in denial about what was happening to her. But she knew he would struggle without a partner. So as a last-ditch attempt, she created a video on her phone and sent it to their son, Will, who is in his early 20s at this stage. And he still lives at home. And basically, she said in that video, she said to her son, first of all, I'm sending you this video. Sorry about this as a burden, but if your father's not back on his feet in a reasonable period of time, you can show him this video and maybe it will help. And she basically says in the video, don't let my death define your life. You need to be with someone. Go to Paris like we planned. They could never get their act together. They had 2 trips to Paris, thwarted by family calamities of one sort or another. He's a big fan of Paris. He knows all the stories. He's read the history. He's just never been there. And that was a dream. So she's saying, now that I'm gone, go to Paris and find somebody. So an extraordinary situation where she's encouraging him to find her successor. Now, where did that idea come from? Well, meet my mother. That's my father standing next to her, by the way, in case there was any confusion. They were married in 1957. Yes, my father was tall. He was 6'6", pediatric surgeon. My mother was a nurse. My mother died far too young. She was 68 when she passed away from cancer. And I was with her in her final days. Well, we all were, but in this day in particular, I was alone with her. And at one point, it was probably a week before she passed away, she mustered her energy. She pulled her mask off and said to me, you've got to help your father find somebody. And I went, what? It was a shocking thing for me to hear. But if I'd thought for 5 minutes, I would have realized it was completely consistent with her approach and who she was, always caring about the other person. So that's where the idea came from. I changed it for the purposes of the story, but the idea is the same. Enlisting the support of one of the children, the son, in this case, so that they might help their father get over the loss of the love of his life and find somebody else so they can live a full and complete life thereafter. So that's where that idea came from. Oh, that's my Dad and Mom looked like a little bit later in life. So, what's behind the story? Well, John Irving's behind the story, and my mother's behind the story. A few more personal connections. First of all, the narrator's name is Jack McMaster. Where did that come from? Well, Doug will get a kick out of this. Came from McMaster University. I always have fun with names. There's always some backstory to why I choose the names I choose for the characters in my novels. You don't hear about those little inside stories unless you come to a talk like this. It's not in the acknowledgments or anything like that. But I went to McMaster in 1978, Doug's final year, I think, there. And I have a degree in mechanical and biomedical engineering from McMaster. It took me 6 years to earn my 4-year degree. Not because of any academic delinquency. I got so heavily involved with student politics on campus, by the constitution of the McMaster Students' Union, had to extend my stay. I was on the council for 4 years, representing the engineering faculty. I was vice president of the Students' Union, which was a full-time job in the summer, a part-time job during the school year. And then in my 5th year, as I was rounding the clubhouse turn, just weeks away from getting my iron ring, I decided to run for president of the Students' Union, thereby putting off entering the real world for yet another year. And I somehow deluded the undergraduates at McMaster and got myself elected president of the Students' Union, which was a full-time job. The McMaster Students' Union is an incorporation. We had, at the time I was running it, it had 26 full-time staff. It had 450 part-time staff. We had 2 bars that we ran. We had a child care center that we ran. We had a convenience store that we ran. I mean, it was a big business operation. And I was a sort of a baptism by fire for me, who didn't know much about running a business. But it worked out really well, changed my life in a way, changed the course of my life without question. So that's where the surname of my narrator comes from, in honor of McMaster. Where does Jack come from? Well, it's named after this guy, Jack Evans. He was the senior vice president of university services at McMaster when I was in the presidency. And other than the president of the university, Jack was the senior university official with whom I had most of my dealings over my term as president. And as you might imagine, the political dynamic between the university administration and the student union is not always, we're not always on the same page, shall we say. It's just not set up that way. We banged heads together on many different issues. And Jack was the guy I did most of my negotiating with. And I really liked Jack. Jack, even when we were fighting, I liked him. And he liked me. He was very shrewd and smart and understood the student's perspective. And even, I think he knew what my position was going to be before I knew what my position was going to be. And we became great friends. We were friends for 40 years. I would see him at least once a year. And I was privileged to speak at his funeral in 2022 when he passed away. So to honor him and my years at McMaster, I called my narrator Jack McMaster. Probably more than you wanted to know about why he's called Jack McMaster, but there you go. Aging, yes, aging is one of the themes examined in this novel. And Jack is having difficulty accepting what it says on his birth certificate, that he is actually 62. He still thinks he feels like he's 35. Over the course of the novel, to help him come to grips with his age, I allow him to identify moments in his day-to-day life that causes him to think, okay, maybe I'm not 35 anymore. And they're enumerated as sort of moments of, I think, comic relief, if you will. So the first one, recovery time after ball hockey. Yeah, our ball hockey league plays every Tuesday night from April to the end of October. And we play once a week for a reason. We couldn't play twice a week. We need the full 7 days to recover because ball hockey, we're playing on a concrete, full-sized hockey rink. There's no gliding in ball hockey. It's all cardio all the time. So when I wake up or when Jack wakes up the morning after a hockey game, I have no idea whose legs I have because they don't feel like the ones I had the day before. So that's one. Next one was, yeah, nocturnal bathroom visits. I'm sure looking around the room, I don't have to explain that to any of you. Sometimes I speak to a women's probus club, and then I have a couple more slides. I describe the, actually, strangely enough, many of the older women tell me, no, they're up a couple times a night too, so who knew? Can no longer sleep in. When I was in university, I could sleep in until 2 in the afternoon, no problem. Now, whether I go to bed at 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, I wake up, as I did this morning, at 5:30, and I'm reading my iPad every morning. Are you guys, can you sleep in or do you get up early too? Or it just happens. And well, we should try and get more out of life by not sleeping, so that's not bad. One of my favorites, more colorful bruises. In my early years playing in this ball hockey league, I remember I stopped a shot with my stomach, a slap shot from the point, and it was my own defenseman. I was just in the way, and it really stung. We play with those orange plastic hard hockey balls there. You don't want to get hit with them. I got hit with it, and it stung. And the next day, I was 43 at the time. The next day, it was, you know, there's a little red mark there, and 2 days later, it was gone. The same calamity befell me last season when I was 64 at the time. And the odyssey of color that bloomed on my stomach over the succeeding 3 weeks was astonishing. It started out the size of the ball. 2 days later, it was the size of a side plate. Then it was the size of a dinner plate. And the reds, the blues, the yellows, the purples. It was an astonishing kaleidoscopic display of color. I would update my wife by showing it to her every morning until she said, "Stop doing that, please." But, you know, our bruises are different when we're 65 than they are when we're 43 or 23. Now, I won't tell you anymore, but he goes on to enumerate, I think, a dozen or so moments in his life that remind him that he is no longer 35. And by the end of it, he is more accepting of his age, and it gives a few moments, well, 12 or so moments of amusement, I hope, for the reader. So that's the aging one. Male friendship. Yeah, I mentioned this already. This is the ball hockey league that I play in. These gratuitous photos are simply to point out that our team won the championship twice in recent years. My twin brother and I, we're, you know, flanking the trophy there. I have an identical twin brother, Tim. We help run the league. We're co-captains in the league, so we have some leadership roles to play. But when I joined the league, neither Tim nor I knew anyone else in the league. We lived a little bit further away from it wasn't a local league for us. It was about a 10-minute drive. So I didn't know any of these characters. And when you're 43, you have your circle of friends already. 43, I had my friends. I had no expectation that within a couple of short years, I would have gathered around me a good dozen or so really important, good friends coming out of this league. It's a very eclectic league. There are lawyers, there are city workers, there are CBC types, there are writers, there are musicians, there are business people and entrepreneurs. And ball hockey is the great equalizer. When you put the helmet on and the visor on, you don't know whether you're stealing the ball off a high-flying lawyer or being checked by a city worker. And it's kind of a neat thing about the sport. It's also a time machine. When you're playing ball hockey, it's no different from when you were playing ball hockey when you were 14 in the street. And it takes you back. And what I realized is that we care about one another in this league. If somebody gets sick, sometimes very sick, uh, a committee swings into action, and meals are cooked and freezers are filled. There's fundraising to be done. And it really brought home to me that we're not just playing ball hockey. That's what brought us there. I wanted to play hockey. Realized we hadn't just built a ball hockey league, we built a community of friends. And, we go to each other's parents' funerals and visitations. We're there for one another. So I wanted to write about that idea of friendship because I watched it happen to me over the course of just a couple of years, and it has been sustained for the succeeding 20 years thereafter. I'm still in the league. We are about to draft our teams for the spring season. So I wanted to touch on male friendship, and that's where it came from. Oops. Songwriting. I won't dwell on this, but I've never written about songwriting in any of my other books, yet it's been a big part of my life in a private sense since I was 17 years old and first picked up a guitar and wrote my first song. I've probably written 30 or 40 songs over the years, few of which, probably, a good handful of which I have completely forgotten for good reason. But when I got to university at McMaster, I played in a band, but fellow engineers, and I was the lead singer in the band. I'm not an awesome singer. I realize that I'm just good enough to know that I'm not good enough. So I was never suffering under the delusion that music might be my career or anything like that. It was always just a private passion. And then when we play in the band, a little more than private. But in fact, we did audition a new lead singer when I was less comfortable singing songs like Aqualung by Jethro Tull. I sort of come from a folk tradition. As the guys in the band say, I hail from the Anne Murray School of Singing. So we did hire a new we did audition and bring on a new lead singer. Down in the bottom left-hand corner there. His name's Andy Mays. We were the first band he'd ever been in, and after he was in our band, he co-founded a little band called the Sky Diggers, which are one of Canada's top sort of cult bands. They've got 24 albums and a Juno Award, and we actually went to see them. But a bunch of the band and we got together and we went to see them at the Westdale Theater in their Hamilton Christmas tour, and Andy Mays had dinner with us beforehand and gave us a shout out from the stage. So it was a lot of fun. So I bring up songwriting because it's one of the themes in the novel. Jack McMaster plays guitar and writes songs. Just a coincidence that I happen to as well. There are actually 2 original songs in the novel that are real songs. The first is a song I wrote about the ball hockey league. Sorry, I hate having to turn around all the time. It's called More Than the Game, and in a way, it's a love song to the ball hockey league. It's I think the key message in the song is in the bridge in the song where it says, when the season finally ends, what rewards have we reaped? Look around and count your friends. That's the score we keep. And it just sort of talks about the power of friendship in the league. I wrote it about 12 or 13 years ago. I've sung it a couple of times at ball hockey events, usually late in the evening when nobody was listening or in a position to listen. But I had fun with it. The second one was a song I wrote back in 1981. And if my math is correct, that's coming up to 44 years ago now. I just started dating that young woman there on the screen. And she had gone home for Christmas after Christmas exams, gone home for Christmas, the way most people do, to Nova Scotia, where she lived. And I was still on campus feeling bereft. And I wrote this song called Until the New Year, which is a song about what's going on around me at the time in the Christmas season and missing her, called Until the New Year, because that's when she would come back. That song stayed with me, largely because she stayed with me. Has she stayed with me yet? No. I mean, there she is. We've now been married for 37 years, I guess it is. And those two songs are in the novel. You read the lyrics, but if you happen to order the audiobook, sorry, Chris, I know I can't do audiobooks through you, but if you order the audiobook, I recorded the songs at my publisher's request. And the songs actually play in the audiobook where they come up in the story, which is something that they don't think has ever happened in an audiobook, that original music has been integrated right into the story, so it's a bit of an innovation, I guess. And that was kind of fun. There's another music connection here in this novel. This is Jim Cuddy. You may know him as the co-founder and lead singer and songwriter in the great Canadian band Blue Rodeo. People have often asked me, how did I get Jim Cuddy to blurb my second novel back in 2010? And well, that was easy. I just leaned over on the bench after a particularly exhausting shift. I leaned over to Jim, who was sitting next to me, because we played on the same team and sometimes on the same line, and asked him if he'd mind reading my manuscript for my second novel and blurbing it. And he sort of grunted in a way that I took to be the affirmative. And he kindly did that. So Jim Cuddy is in this novel. He's the only real person in the novel. And he stumbles upon one of the songs in the novel and records it on a Christmas album or something. You'll read about it in the novel. I know you're going to read the novel. And when I finished the manuscript, I emailed Jim, and I said, Jim, I finished this new novel, and it's got songwriting in it as one of its themes, and you're in the novel. I've written you into the novel. Here are the pages where you appear. He's only in it a few times, but important moments in the story. And I asked him, I said, I'd like to keep you in the novel. If you're uncomfortable, would rather not, I can easily just change the name of the Jim Cuddy character to another name, and no one would be the wiser. But he emailed me back 20 minutes later, which is fast for Jim, and said, I don't even have to read it. Go ahead and use my name, and thanks. I kept that email, though. No lawyer's letters have yet been exchanged or anything like that, but when the novel came out, a copy was delivered to his house in Riverdale on launch day. And I've spoken to him a couple of times since. I had a good chat with him at the ball hockey park earlier last year. And interestingly, he read the novel in Paris. And, that's pretty cool that he read the novel in Paris. I haven't read the novel in Paris. I wrote a few pieces of it in Paris, but I've never read it there, so it's kind of neat. So he's in the story too, which adds a bit of cachet to it, maybe. All right, Paris in the 1920s. It's an era and a city in which I've been interested for a very long time. You may know that something happened in Paris in the 1920s. It was sort of a cultural maelstrom descended on Paris as artists of all descriptions, composers, musicians, dancers, sculptors, painters, lots of writers, arrived in Paris, largely because they felt something was happening there, but also Paris was an extraordinarily inexpensive city in which to live. You could live in Paris for about 25% of what it would cost you to live in New York in the 1920s. And writers like Hemingway and F. Scott Fitzgerald, and that guy with the mustache there is Morley Callahan, the great Canadian short story writer and novelist. They all flocked to Paris in the 1920s, where in a way they reshaped the cultural landscape, and they certainly irrevocably changed literature, particularly Hemingway. Prose in the post-war, Great War, First World War period, was very heavily ornamented, long, labyrinthine, convoluted sentences. And Hemingway turned that completely on its head, writing these spare, barren sentences that used a very limited vocabulary. And that reshaped writing, postmodern literature, for the foreseeable future. And I've always been fascinated by that. In fact, those are the books on the left-hand corner there. Those are all the books I have just on Hemingway. I don't even like Hemingway. I don't like his writing. I hail from the why use 6 words when 12 will do school of writing. I like to splash around in the English language. Hemingway is sort of anathema to my approach to writing. But I've been fascinated always by his role in changing, forever changing literature. And it started in Paris in the 1920s. So I've read lots of books about Paris in that era. In fact, there is a character in this novel. Oh, there we are. Yeah, here we are, Paris. If you're interested in seeing what Paris was like in the 1920s, you can go to Paris now. Paris, like ball hockey, is a time machine as well. The makeup of the city, the architecture of the city, the way the streets are laid out, the way the stores and the properties are laid out, resists change. If somebody wanted to open up a Home Depot on the left bank in Paris, they'd have to negotiate with 30 or 40 separate proprietors of coffee, little cafes and bookstores and boutiques and restaurants and bars. It would never happen. So Paris of the 1920s looks very much the way it does today. And the cafes that those writers like Fitzgerald and Hemingway and Morley Callahan frequented, La Coupole, La Rotonde, Le Select, in Montparnasse and on Boulevard Saint-Germain, they're all still there and they haven't changed. I went to Paris, we go every couple of years, and I always go to these cafes. I went to Paris, or to the Le Select Bistro, sorry, that's Toronto, Le Select Bistro, Le Select Cafe in Paris, in Montparnasse, about 2 blocks from where Hemingway and his wife Hadley lived, their second apartment in Paris. And I ordered chocolat chaud, hot chocolate, which is, I don't like coffee. It's hard to see in this picture, but the wooden bar that I'm sitting at and the counter, the cupboards and the shelves in front of me, those are all original from the 1920s. Nothing has changed. If you look at the pottery I'm drinking from, the cup and the saucer and stuff, I think those are original from the 1920s too. So if you're interested in Paris, you get a real feel of what it was like by going to those cafes today. There is a character in this novel. I know this slide is going to change. I know it will. Oh, we're getting there. There's a character in this novel named Elizabeth Callahan Hughes. I won't tell you much about her, except to say that her name, she goes by Callahan, and she was named after Morley Callahan because her grandmother, who moved to Paris when she was 18 years old from England, got to know Morley Callahan and his wife Loretto. These are fictional characters, but I'm telling you the backstory. And Morley Callahan, the great Canadian writer, some of you may have read him, he and Hemingway were very good friends because in 1923, Hemingway came back to Toronto, moved to Toronto to work in the Toronto Star's newsroom, and Morley Callahan was with him at the time. They got to know each other, and Hemingway encouraged Callahan to come to Paris. That was the center of the literary universe at the time, and Hemingway thought very highly of Callahan's writing. And finally, in 1928, Callahan and his wife Loretto did move to Paris for a while. You may also remember that Hemingway fancied himself a bit of a boxer. He boxed from the time he was in high school till shortly before he died. He would take on all comers. He wasn't a great boxer, though he thought he was. He was a great brawler. He was a big guy and a bit of a bully. Okay, a real bully, not just a bit of a bully. And on, I think it was Wednesday afternoons in Paris, Hemingway and Morley Callahan would spar in the boxing ring in the basement of the American Club in Paris. And if you know Callahan, he's about this tall, very thin and wiry. However, He boxed on U of T's boxing team. He knew how to box. And in this one famous true story, the timekeeper rang the bell and they circled one another and they boxed their round. And late in the round, Callahan clocked Hemingway, knocked him to the canvas. I don't mean he stumbled to the canvas. I mean he was momentarily knocked out. There were birds singing. His lip was bloodied. And Hemingway had never been on the canvas before. He would challenge people the rest of his life. No one can knock me out. Callahan knocked him out, a guy this size who was really skinny. And as he dragged himself to his feet, stumbling with the birds still chirping, the timekeeper said, "Sorry, fellas, I let that round run to 4 minutes." And Hemingway was incensed. If it had been a 3-minute round, he wouldn't have been on the canvas. And it ruined his relationship with the timekeeper for a very long time. The timekeeper was F. Scott Fitzgerald. And they've written about this. About 6 months later, a story came out, I think it was in Esquire magazine, recounting this story. And you can imagine that made Hemingway very, very unhappy. There have been many apocryphal versions of the story shared over the years. I think the most accurate version of the story can be found in Morley Callahan's wonderful memoir, That Summer in Paris. And it's a great book. I have a first edition of it. It's still widely available. So that's an interesting story that is quite true. Oh my gosh, I haven't got my book. Stand by, talk amongst yourselves. I'm gonna read you, give you a flavor of the book. Thought I'd read you the first half of the novel. I won't do that. Let me just read you, I'm going to read you a page and a half from the very beginning of the story. I don't have to set anything up because it's chapter 1. But this gives you a sense, I think, of both the humor, but also the melancholy that underlies this story. There are a couple of gut punches early on in the novel, and then it goes on an upward trajectory. And you can always count on me, if you've read my novels before, for a happy ending. So I'll just read you this first page and a half. "Now that's using your face, Jack Mack," a spectator shouted as the buzzer sounded to end my weekly ball hockey game. To be clear, I actually knew who yelled from the sidelines, but let's just go with a spectator, shall we? Why encourage him? My teammates gathered around to congratulate me on the winning goal. Yes, it's true. For once, I was the hero. Let me give you the slow motion replay of my big moment in case you're blissfully unaware. And also because my clutch goal, spectacular though it was, did not make the highlight reel on SportsCenter that night. With the game tied in the final minute of play, I had assumed my position in front of the net to try to screen their goalie. The ball somehow found its way to one of our stronger defensemen back on the blue line. I watched him wind up for one of his terrifying slap shots as I trembled in the firing line. My mission, and I chose to accept it, was to try to deflect the ball to make it even tougher for their goalie to stop. Miraculously, the blade of my stick caught a piece of the orange plastic sphere as it whizzed towards the net at a speed that had me waiting for a sonic boom. It was sort of a good news, bad news, good news scenario. I did deflect the ball. Good news, but right into my own face. Bad news. That may sound painful, but for years I've worn a full wire cage on my helmet. Smart, right? So the ball bounced harmlessly off my well-protected face and into the net to win the game with about 2 seconds left on the clock. Good news again. It used to be that my ball hockey game was a high point of my week, which is saying something for a guy who had just about everything I could have ever desired. My life was nearly perfect. That all changed 2 years, 5 months, and 14 days ago. Despite it all, I still loved and needed my ball hockey and the roughly 90 guys who made up the 6 teams in our community league. In fact, I think I needed the game and the guys more than ever. You see, for an hour or so every week from April to October, my mind was completely and singularly focused on playing the sport I've loved since I was about 6 years old. Okay, let me spell it out. It was an escape. An escape for just a brief moment each week, but an escape nonetheless. It was only after the game and after the post-game analysis at our local watering hole that reality returned and settled over me like falling ash from a volcanic eruption. Let me just stop there. Just a reminder, if you get the audiobook, and I'm the voice on the audiobook for better or worse, you get the actual songs, the 2 original songs recorded and played there. Let me just wrap up with a public service announcement or shameless self-promotion, depending on your perspective. Some of you may have heard of the online platform called Substack. If you haven't, it doesn't matter. So it's a place where writers of all description can put out a post however frequently they want and have it sent to subscribers. I'm on Substack. I've been on it for about coming up to 3 years, so I have more than 100 posts on my Substack. I write about the writing life, the authors I've come in contact with, the books I love, backstories to my novels. If you're interested at all in that kind of thing, it's a free subscription, and the easiest way to do it, to subscribe, is to go to my website and scroll to the bottom of the homepage. And right at the bottom of the homepage is a spot to put your email address. I swear to you, Pizza will not start sending you emails. As soon as you do that, it's a very means that you can unsubscribe whenever you like, and it's free. Just every second Sunday morning, you'll get something from me with lots of photos in it, and it's about a 5-minute fun read. I think I've taxed your time quite a bit already. If there are any questions, I'm delighted to respond. Calm down, there's time for everybody. Oh, Jack. No, it's quite similar. Yes, in short, we probably did violate the, yeah, we'd make different teams every year. That other picture there was the year we used teams from the KHL in Russia. Yeah, I was on, our team was Jokerit, which I think is a Finnish team, and we won that year. This is so slow, it would take me too long to get back to that slide, but yes, we used the real logos, and anyway, no one has yet sent us a cease and desist order. Yes, Grant.
Terri, do you have all of these ideas start to write, or
No, everyone hear the question? I'm an engineer by academic training, so engineers don't build bridges without blueprints. I don't write novels without a blueprint. I'm a very anally retentive planner. I plan the story out to within an inch of its life before I ever write the first word in the manuscript. So I know the story backwards, forwards, up and down, and side to side. It takes me about 12 or 14 months to do that. And I wind up with a scene-by-scene, bullet point version of the novel that runs about 85 or 95 pages. And then that is the outline that then guides my fevered sprint of when I write the manuscript. And I write the manuscript in about 2 months. Which you can do if you know the story as well as I do at that stage in the process. So I'm very much thinking beforehand. I don't like to rewrite, so I don't know what's going to happen in the next chapter. And if then I figure it out, I have to go back and rewrite the previous chapter so that it matches what's coming up. So I wait till I know the story cold, and then I write the manuscript right at the end of the process. That's how it works for me. I know Ian Hamilton very well. He's a good friend of mine. He takes the opposite of it. Yeah. Yeah. Ian's writing process couldn't be as any more different than mine. He goes down into his basement and he just starts, his fingers start flying over the keyboard and he doesn't know what's happening until he's finished. I couldn't possibly write that way, but you can't argue with his extraordinary success as a writer. He's done very well. He's a lovely guy too, as you discovered. Other comments, questions? Yes. Yeah, let me just take you back a couple of years when ebooks first arrived. There was a great fear that within 5 or 10 years, we would not have any real books anymore, that everyone would simply read them on their Kindle or their Kobo or their iPad. And ebooks grew very sharply for about 3 years, and now they have just leveled off. And they are about 18 to 20% of my book sales are ebooks, 4% are audiobooks, but that's a bit, let me add to the context there. While it's only 4% audiobooks right now, it remains the fastest growing segment in publishing is audiobooks. So that share of my overall sales will likely rise over time. So the state of the industry it's not great. I think overall book sales are sort of on a slow decline as we have so many more competing demands on our time. If we didn't have any video games or iPads or social media or streaming services, booksellers like Chris might be doing a little bit better. But we're working very hard to keep books front and center. I've got 2 more in the can. I just got the cover art yesterday for my new one coming up. It's called The Marionette. It'll be coming out in October. And then I have another one ready for the following year, so a shorter one. So it's, we're struggling, but I think people will always read a good story. At least that's what I tell myself. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Yes, Doug. Does it change my writing style, the rise of ebooks and audiobooks? The short answer is no. I don't think about that. Maybe some writers do, but I don't. I just think about writing the story I've come up with in the best way I know how, so that it's compelling and engaging and moving and powerful and funny and readable. And I just assume that the audio version and the ebook is going to play the same way. So it hasn't changed my writing, and I hope it doesn't, because I just want the story to be the story.
Terry, I don't know if you've got time at the end with.
I'm going to go back and sit with Chris, and I'm happy to sign books. I think they've got almost all of have 8, I think 8 of my 9 novels there. Yeah, so I'm delighted to go back and sign for as long as it takes.
Jack?
You can all hear me?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I want to thank Terry for his interesting and informative talk to our Probus Club today, and his humorous presentation regarding his 9th novel, The New Season, while also emphasizing the melancholy. As some of the longer-term members of our Probus Club may recall, Terry was our speaker once before, I'm guessing 6 or 7 years ago, something like that. At that time, he was promoting his first novel, The Best Laid Plans, about a crusty old Scot, Angus McClintock, who let his name stand in a federal election to get away from being an engineering professor, teaching engineering students English of all things. As a former engineering student myself, I can attest that English was my least favorite subject in university, as it was for many of my classmates. maybe Terry, who eventually became a writer, disagreed with most of us, but we'll see. We used to say, bring on the math and physics, we'd say. I bought Terry's first novel after that meeting, and I thoroughly enjoyed the book, which has many plot twists and was very funny and enjoyable. If a new season is in any way comparable, I heartily recommend that you consider buying it. As an aside, my sister-in-law was at our place for dinner last night, and I asked her if she's in a book club or two. I asked her if she'd heard of Terry. She said yes, and just listened to the audio book of his new novel, and she thoroughly enjoyed it. So, Terry, thank you for spending your valuable time with us here today and for your excellent presentation. We have a small honorarium here to thank you for your efforts. Thank you.
Before I entertain a motion to adjourn, I'd just like to say that I'm reading Terry's book, and I'm hoping that he will share the recipe for the Mexican tortilla pie that's in there. In any case, motion to adjourn. Jack? Second? Great. Thank you very much. Our meeting is adjourned. See you next month. Take care. Bye-bye.